Hi folks, welcome back. So today we're going to have a look at Seneca for the Love and Marriage unit, and you'll notice it's in red. Seneca is not writing poetry, he's writing prose, and he's a Stoic philosopher writing in the 1st century AD under Emperor Nero. So the extract that we're going to look at is from De Beneficiis. Oh gosh, say that 3 times fast. De Beneficiis. Yep, got it. On benefits, which is really all about like reciprocity, generosity and relationships, so give and take basically. Just for a little bit of context on Seneca, Seneca is a Stoic philosopher, which means he doesn't believe in giving into extreme emotions like passion and anger. In his view of relationships, he also, in other texts, talks about how relationships shouldn't always be for material advantage in particular. So don't be friends with someone because you think they can do you a favour. Don't marry someone just because you think they'll make you wealthier. And that's quite countercultural if we think about why marriages were arranged amongst wealthy Romans. But there are quite a few examples with Seneca of the way he lives being different to the way he writes. Seneca also had a really loyal wife. And a bit of a content warning, what you can see in the image is Seneca's forced suicide. So eventually Seneca falls out of favour with Emperor Nero, who he tutored as a boy, and Nero orders him to kill himself. Paulina, Seneca's wife, is so loyal that she decides to die with her husband. So it's an upsetting and quite dark story, but it's something we'll have also seen in Pliny's story, Faithful Unto Death. And it gives us an impression of the kind of expectations of a good wife in Rome and how entwined the lives of husband and wife were expected to be amongst some Romans. So we're going to have a look at the Latin, the English, and some of the effects. Bearing in mind this is not poetry, so I am not going to be talking about metre or particularly like end line and front line emphasis. We have to bin all that because we're looking at something that would be written as prose. So, non iam ola repudio erubescit, postquam feminae quaedam illustres ac nobiles non consulum numero sed maritorum annos suos computant, et exeunt matrimoni causa nubunt repudii. So, is any woman, feminae, today, yam, I guess, ashamed, erubescit, so you wouldn't know that one from the language paper, but the others you would. Let's have a look. Count their age, so numero, computant, and matrimony we've got, let's have a look, to marry, maritorum, we've got is husbands, of the husbands, nubunt, they marry, repudii, to be divorced, so passive infinitive. A few things there you probably know from the language paper. And we've got some rhetorical questions. He's being a little bit absurd, saying no one can stay married. Okay, we'll talk more about effects in a moment. Tam dio istuc timebator, quam dio rarum erat, quia nolla sine divortio acta sunt, quod saepe audiebant it facere didicerunt. Num iam olus adulteri pudor est, postquam eo ventum est ut nulla virum habeat, nisi ut adulterum irritet. So, let's have a look at what you know from the language paper. Timebator, it was feared. Divortio acta sunt, so acta sunt was complete. Sine divortio, without a divorce. Root words and language paper can help you there. Pudor est, pudor is shame, and we'll talk more about shame in a moment. Adulteri is adultery. What else do we have? Virum is man. Adulterum, adultery. So lots of vocab here from the language paper. Okay. Pudicitia argumentum est deformitatis, quam invenies tam miseram, tam sordidam, ut illis satis situnum adulterorum par. Nisi singulis divisit horas et non sufficet dies omnibus. Nisi apud alium gestata est, apud alium mansit, infrunita et antiqua est, quae nesciat matrimonium vocari unum adulterium. Pudicitia is chastity, so this is womanly shame, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. Ugliness, deformitatis, like deformity. Quam is what woman. It's whom, but it's the feminine whom. Invenies, will you find. Tam miseram, so wretched. Tam sordidam, so sordid or undesirable. All words you know from the language paper. Nisi, unless. Dies, omnibus, all and days. Matrimonium, marriage. Vocare, to be called. And adulterium is lover, as in adultery, and we'll talk more about that as a key term as well. So it's important to note Seneca's blaming the women here for being unfaithful. In Roman law, adultery would only apply to either a woman having sex outside of marriage or a man having sex outside of his marriage with somebody else's wife. So if a Roman husband had what we would call an affair, but the woman he had an affair with was not married, that would not be classed in Roman law as adultery. So there is a double standard there. Adultery only really applies in Roman law if it upsets a husband, be that the husband in the first marriage or the husband of the husband's lover. So there is a double standard. Adultery is when a Roman wife has sex outside marriage and when a Roman husband has sex with another man's wife. That means if he's just playing away with some other woman who's not married, in Roman marriage law, it's not classed as adultery. So that double standard can help us to think partly about why Seneca's putting so much emphasis on the women being unfaithful here. It's not necessarily that the men aren't being unfaithful. It's just that their infidelity is viewed very differently and the rules about their infidelity are quite different. So that's worth bearing in mind just for context on this passage. If we start to have a look at some of the style notes then, one thing that you can look for when you're looking at prose is any kind of aspects of rhetoric, so anything that's really persuasive. Obviously, if you see rhetorical questions like we have here, it ends with repudi, it's really, really long. Rhetorical questions are a gift because the punctuation will always get you there. You can spot a question mark, you know it's rhetorical, make the most of it. Num, surely, ... not. Nonne is surely. So I know it's a bit counterintuitive. Ulla is like any, so it's very much a generalisation here. And there's a parody here on the Roman dating system. So non consulum numero sed maritorum. So they don't count their years by the consul who was in charge, which is kind of how the Romans would mark the year instead of using numerical dating. So it'd be in the year of such and such. And here he's saying that Roman women are getting remarried so quickly that they're counting the year by, oh, that's the year I was married to such and such. So there's a bit of parody going on. And the word order, the syntax, emphasises that punchline because the literal word order would be not with the number of consuls, but the number of husbands, they count their years. So it's kind of delaying the punchline to annos suos computant. Okay. We also have a little bit of balance. Exunt matrimoni causa. So you've got that on the other hand as well. Nubunt repudi. So they leave one marriage just to marry and divorce again. Okay. So we've got tam du and quam du. We've got this pairing to kind of show a bit of moral decline going on here. So it was only feared as long as it was unusual. And we can't really get that pairing across in English. But basically he's saying if it's fashionable, Roman women will do it. And in the empire, there's a little grain of truth to that. So he's really talking about a social class of women who all know each other, think Real Housewives, and it's that kind of atmosphere. They're all very affluent, they're all very competitive, possibly a little bit spoilt from wealthy families. So he's kind of shaming them for that and saying that they'll do anything so long as it's popular. Quia nulla sine divortio acta sunt. So we've got exaggeration here. Nothing is complete without divorce. So using absolute terms like nulla and ulla that we had earlier, nothing and anything. So he's kind of blaming gossip as well. He's saying that, they often hear about it and they're very impressionable. And this idea that Roman women were impressionable it is how they're viewed. Remember, in Roman marriage systems, a woman would have a pater familias, so either her husband or her father would be in charge of her. Think about what you've learned about Roman marriage ceremonies. She goes from her father's house to her husband's house. So in the eyes of Roman men, in a way, their wives are viewed as dependents. On the day of her wedding, the bride puts away her toys and puts away childish things. And Roman women, for their first marriage in particular, could be quite young. So for all of these reasons, the way that male authors talk about wives can be, to a modern eye, quite patronising. But he's blaming the gossip and saying that makes women very impressionable. Okay. We've got another rhetorical question. Nom iritet. Pudor is a keyword, pudor and pudicitia. And I'll talk more about the context of that, because it is shame, and it's translated as shame and chastity. Pudicitia is kind of womanly shame. And we see this in epitaphs as well. So it's a very Republican value I'll talk more about in a moment. We have a climax with tam tam ut, so that. And I tried to get this across when I was reading. We've got sibilance, so this repeated satisit. It's kind of an hiss in it. It's quite disapproving in the way it sounds. Utilis satisit unum adulterum par nissi singulis divisidoras sed non sufficit dies omnibus. Like, it's got a nasty hissing sound. Even though not every word begins with an S, there are enough of them in there to make it sound quite like grumpy. Don't say grumpy in an exam, quite disapproving would be better. We have anaphora again with nisi nisi, unless. We've got repetition of apud. And again, that's really hammering the point home. So it's to be emphatic and to try to be rhetorical and convey a point within that rhetorical question that we have again, ending in mansi. There's loads of rhetorical questions in this bit of text. We have pairing as well. So in frontier et antiqua, so it's like old-fashioned and outdated. He could say one of those things. He chooses to say both. He's pairing these ideas together. They're not quite the same, but again, it's emphatic. To have one husband is called adultery. So there's like this inversion and this kind of absurdity in what he says at the very end. So the last bit we could think about as an argumentum ad absurdum, like an argument toward the absurd. And that's what Seneca really ends on at the end of this passage that the exam board have chosen. But he's basically expressing his horror at the way the women are behaving. And, Seneca, he's writing under Nero, but he's been alive a long time, and he's actually lived under quite a lot of different emperors. So he's seen a lot of change in Rome. So one of the Republican values that is emphasised perhaps most in Augustan Rome is pudicitia. And pudicitia is more than an idea. She's deified as a Roman goddess. And statues of pudicitia would be displayed in Rome. If you look at the statue of her here, she is very, very shrouded in clothing. She's heavily covered. She has a very modest posture. So she's kind of tilting inward a little bit, and she's covering her face with her veil. And that is the picture of womanly modesty. This really drove even women's fashion. Like, there was even a point under Augustus where a very simple nodus hairstyle became really popular because it showed that you were a very conservative woman and you espoused really conservative values. And we see that with pudicitia here. So when you see that word choice, it's more than just chastity. It's more than just womanly shame. It's an idea that the Romans thought was so important that they anthropomorphized it in statues and had images of it around the city. If we think about how this applies to the house of the chaste lovers, this is an image that is really unusual, but it is on the prescription. And here you've got the kind of debauchery that Seneca seems to be talking about, where we've got a dinner party that's just gone way out of hand. But if you look at the women in this image, they are not wives. So although husbands and wives would attend dinner parties together, this is a drinking party and only the men would attend the drinking party. Because the women so far left, third in from the left, are both depicted to be naked. That suggests that these women are professional sex workers. So we have a dinner party with prostitutes and we have a serving girl bringing in wine, it seems, in the background. It makes the point of the double standard that I talked about earlier. So although Seneca blames the dissolution of marriages, the divorce of couples on the women and the women's kind of promiscuity, I guess, actually, this shows us what the husbands were really up to. And although in Roman marriage law it might be deemed acceptable for men to be unfaithful to wives, that didn't necessarily mean that the marriage could sustain that over a very long time. So, for example, in some marriages that were sine manu, when the wife's father retained control over her, the father of the wife might have something to say if his daughter's being treated very poorly. So there is a double standard there. The double standard exists in the ancient world because if men have sex outside marriage, it doesn't call into question the legitimacy of the children in their family home. Whereas if women are unfaithful, there's no paternity test. So it's not clear who the father of the children is. And that makes inheritance laws very difficult. So there is like a practical implication to this. But this artwork shows the double standard and what was expected of wives on the one hand and what men were allowed to do on the other. So if you get this image in an exam, you might want to compare it to Seneca. Okay, folks, I hope that was helpful. I'll leave a link in the description with any helpful resources I can find, and I'll try to get the complete series out to you as soon as I can. Thanks.